The dust from the departing wagon hadn't even settled before Willa Calloway heard the snide laughter rippling through the small crowd gathered outside the general store in Salida, Colorado, on that sweltering afternoon in July 1878. She stood motionless on the wooden sidewalk, her hands clutched together at her waist, watching Theodore Montgomery's back disappear down the main street without so much as a backward glance. That made six. 6 men in the span of 8 months who had courted her, proposed marriage, and then abruptly withdrawn their offers once they learned the complete truth about her circumstances. Willa's throat tightened, but she refused to let the tears fall, not here, not in front of these people who seemed to derive such perverse entertainment from her repeated humiliations. "Poor girl," Mrs. Henderson whispered loudly enough for half the street to hear. "Pretty as a picture, but no man wants to take on that burden." Willa turned on her heel and walked with measured dignity toward the edge of town where she had tied her horse. Her cheeks burned with shame and anger in equal measure. The truth was simple and devastating. Her father, William Calloway, had been one of Salida's most respected ranchers until a riding accident 3 years ago left him paralyzed from the waist down. Her mother had died bringing Willa into the world 22 years ago, leaving Willa to care for her father alone. The ranch had fallen into disrepair, the cattle sold off one by one to pay for medicine and supplies, until all that remained was a small homestead and barely enough income to survive. Every suitor who came calling seemed charmed by Willa's auburn hair, her green eyes, her gentle manner, until they understood that marrying her meant taking responsibility for an invalid father and a failing property. She untied her mare and was preparing to mount when she heard a voice behind her, low and measured. "Miss Calloway." Willa turned to find Owen Blackwell standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. She knew him by sight. Everyone in Salida did. He worked as a ranch hand at the massive Drummond spread west of town, known for his skill with horses and his reputation as a man of few words. He was probably 25 or 26, tall and lean, with dark hair that fell over his forehead and eyes the color of dark honey. She had seen him in town dozens of times over the years, but had never exchanged more than polite nods. "Mr. Blackwell," she said quietly, confused by his approach. Owen shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I witnessed what happened back there, with Montgomery." Willa's face flushed again. "Then you know I should be getting home." "I know those men are fools," Owen said, his voice steady. "Every single one of them." She stared at him, uncertain how to respond. Was this pity? She had endured enough pity to last a lifetime. Owen seemed to read her expression. "That came out wrong. What I mean is, I have been watching you for some time now, Miss Calloway. Not in any improper way, but whenever you come to town, I notice. I have wanted to speak with you for months, but I always figured you were spoken for, what with all the attention you received from the merchants and the bankers' sons. Well, as you can see, none of that attention amounted to anything," Willa said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Because they are fools," Owen repeated firmly. He took a step closer, still maintaining a respectful distance. "I am just a cowboy, Miss Calloway. I do not have a big ranch or money in the bank, but I have savings put away from years of work. I have 2 good hands and I know how to work hard. I also know what it means to care for family who needs help." Willa's grip on her horse's reins tightened. "Everyone in this town knows my circumstances, Mr. Blackwell. If you are about to make me another offer just to see how quickly you can withdraw it, I would prefer you spare me the trouble." "I am not going to withdraw anything," Owen said. His gaze was direct, honest. "My mother was sick for 5 years before she passed. My father and I cared for her together. I know it is not easy, and I know it takes a special kind of strength. The kind of strength I see in you every time you come to town with your head held high despite everything." Willa felt something crack inside her chest, a tiny fissure in the wall she had built around her heart. "You do not know me. Then let me get to know you," Owen said simply. "I am not asking for an answer today or tomorrow. I am just asking if I might call on you properly. No promises, no expectations. Just a chance to see if there might be something between us worth pursuing." She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception or false charity. All she found was an earnest hope in something else, something warmer that made her pulse quicken despite her better judgment. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you want to complicate your life with mine?" Owen's expression softened. "Because when I see you, I do not see complications. I see a woman who has sacrificed everything for her father, who works harder than most men I know, who has remained kind and gracious, even when life has given her every reason to become bitter. I see someone remarkable, and if those other men could not see it, then I count myself fortunate to have the opportunity they threw away." The words settled over Willa like a warm blanket on a cold night. For the first time in months, she felt something other than despair and exhaustion. "You may call on me, Mr. Blackwell," she said softly. "But I warn you, my father is protective and our home is modest." "I do not care about modest," Owen said, and the smile that crossed his face transformed him from handsome to beautiful. "When would be a good time?" "Sunday afternoon after church services. We live 5 miles north on the old Riverbend Road." "I know the place," Owen said, settling his hat back on his head. "I will be there at 2 o'clock if that suits you." "That suits me fine." Willa mounted her horse, and for the first time all day she felt a small smile tugging at her lips. As she rode out of town, she glanced back once to see Owen still standing there, watching her go. The sight sent an unfamiliar flutter through her stomach. When she arrived home, the small ranch house looked particularly shabby in the late afternoon light. The fence needed mending, the porch sagged slightly on one side, and the barn desperately required a fresh coat of paint. But it was home, and Willa had learned long ago that pride meant nothing compared to keeping a roof over their heads and food on the table. She tended to her horse, fed the chickens, and gathered the eggs before heading inside. Her father was in his wheeled chair by the window where she had left him, a book open in his lap. William Calloway had once been a robust man, broad-shouldered and strong. Now his legs were useless, his body diminished, but his mind remained sharp and his love for his daughter boundless. "How was town?" he asked, looking up from his book. Willa set the egg basket on the table and began preparing their supper. "Theodore Montgomery called off our courtship." Her father's face darkened. "That spineless weasel, he is the 6th one, is he not?" "The 6th," Willa confirmed, trying to keep her voice light. "But something else happened today." She told her father about Owen Blackwell while she worked, peeling potatoes and slicing salt pork. William listened carefully, his expression unreadable. "Owen Blackwell," he said thoughtfully. "Good reputation as a horseman, quiet fellow. His father died last winter, did he not?" "I believe so. He mentioned his mother passed several years ago." William was silent for a long moment. "What did you think of him?" Willa paused, her hands still in the wash basin. "I thought he was kind and honest. He said those other men were fools." "Well, they were," William said firmly. "Any man who cannot see your worth is an absolute fool." "Papa, you are biased." "I am honest," her father corrected. "But Willa, I want you to be careful. I know you are lonely, and I know you want a life beyond caring for your old father, but I do not want to see you hurt again." Willa dried her hands and came to kneel beside her father's chair. "I am always careful. But Papa, I felt something today when he spoke to me." something I have not felt with any of the others. Like maybe he actually sees me, not just the burden I represent. William reached out and cupped her face gently. You are not a burden, my darling girl. Not to me, and you should not be to anyone who deserves you. He is coming on Sunday afternoon, Willa said. I hope that is all right. Of course it is. I will be on my best behavior and try not to frighten him away with my overprotective father routine. Willa laughed and kissed her father's weathered cheek. I love you, Papa. And I love you, more than all the stars in the sky. The days until Sunday crawled by with agonizing slowness. Willa threw herself into her work, scrubbing the house from top to bottom, mending the dress she planned to wear, and baking bread that she hoped would turn out well. She caught herself checking her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand more times than she cared to admit, tucking stray wisps of auburn hair behind her ears, and wondering what Owen Blackwell saw when he looked at her. Sunday morning, she and her father made the trip to town for services at the small white church on the corner of Front Street and 3rd. Willa helped her father into the wheeled chair she kept in the back of the wagon and pushed him up the ramp the congregation had built 2 years ago. Inside, she was acutely aware of the whispers and sidelong glances, the way Mrs. Henderson and her friends leaned together with knowing looks. Halfway through the service, Willa became aware of someone's gaze on her. She glanced to her right and saw Owen Blackwell 3 rows back, sitting alone. When their eyes met, he nodded slightly, and Willa felt heat rise in her cheeks. She turned her attention back to Reverend Thompson's sermon, but she could not remember a single word of it later. After the service, Owen approached as Willa was helping her father back into the wagon. Miss Calloway, Mr. Calloway, he said respectfully. It is a beautiful morning. Mr. Blackwell, William said, measuring the younger man with a careful look. I understand you are calling on my daughter this afternoon. Yes, sir, if that is still acceptable. We will see, William said gruffly, though Willa caught the tiny twitch at the corner of his mouth that meant he was suppressing a smile. Papa, Willa chided gently. I will be there at 2 o'clock as planned, Owen said, apparently unfazed by William's protective posturing. At home, Willa changed into her best dress, a simple green cotton that matched her eyes. She brushed her hair until it shone and pinned it up carefully, leaving a few soft curls to frame her face. Her father watched her preparations with amusement. You look beautiful, sweetheart. Stop fussing. I am not fussing. I am just making sure I look presentable. You always look presentable. Now you look extraordinary. At exactly 2 o'clock, they heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Willa's heart jumped into her throat. She wiped her suddenly damp palms on her apron and went to the door. Owen rode a handsome bay gelding and led a second horse, a pretty gray mare with a gentle eye. He dismounted and removed his hat, and Willa noticed he was wearing clean clothes, his dark hair neatly combed back. Good afternoon, Miss Calloway, he said. Good afternoon, Mr. Blackwell. Please come in. Owen tied both horses to the porch rail and followed Willa inside. The house was small but spotlessly clean, furnished simply with handmade furniture and a few treasured items that had belonged to Willa's mother. William sat in his chair by the fireplace, his hands folded in his lap. Mr. Blackwell, have a seat. Owen sat down on the edge of the sofa, his hat balanced on his knee. Thank you for allowing me to call, sir. My daughter says you work for the Drummond Ranch. Yes, sir. I have been there for 6 years now. I am the head wrangler. That is a position of responsibility. I like to think I have earned it through hard work. William leaned forward slightly. My daughter means everything to me, Mr. Blackwell. She has sacrificed years of her life to care for me when most young women her age would have run off to find their own happiness. I will not see her hurt by someone who cannot appreciate what she is offering. Papa, Willa said softly, mortified, but Owen met William's eyes steadily. "I understand, sir, and I want you to know that I have no intention of hurting your daughter. I have admired her from a distance for a long time, and now that I have the chance to know her, I intend to be worthy of that opportunity." William studied Owen for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. Willa, why do you not show Mr. Blackwell around the property? I am sure he would like to see what needs doing around here." "Mr. Calloway, I did not come here to inspect your property," Owen said carefully. "I know why you came, but humor an old man. I want to see if you are the type to run when you see how much work there is to be done." Willa wanted to sink through the floor, but Owen simply stood and offered her his arm. "I would be happy to see the property with Miss Calloway as my guide." Outside, Willa let out a long breath. "I am so sorry about my father. He is protective." "He should be protective," Owen said. "You are precious to him. I would think less of him if he were not careful about who comes courting." They walked slowly around the property, Willa pointing out the chicken coop, the small barn, the vegetable garden she maintained, and the corrals that stood empty now. "You used to have cattle?" Owen asked. "We did, before my father's accident. We sold them off gradually to pay for expenses. Now I keep chickens for eggs and grow what vegetables I can. I also take in sewing from some of the ladies in town, though not as much as I used to." Owen looked around thoughtfully. "This land has good bones. With some work, it could be productive again. I am one woman, Mr. Blackwell. I do what I can, but there is only so much I can manage alone." He turned to face her, and the intensity in his amber eyes made her breath catch. "You do not have to be alone, Willa. That is what I am trying to tell you." The sound of her given name on his lips sent a shiver down her spine. "You barely know me. How can you be so certain?" "I know that I think about you constantly. I know that when I saw Theodore Montgomery ride away from you the other day, I wanted to drag him back and make him apologize for his stupidity. I know that when I imagine my future, you are in it, and that feels more right than anything else in my life ever has." Willa's heart pounded so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "Owen, I need you to understand what you would be taking on. My father will never walk again. He needs help with everything. This ranch is barely surviving. I have nothing to offer you except work and hardship and responsibility." Owen reached out and gently took her hand. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip strong but careful. "You have yourself to offer, and that is everything." "I am not afraid of work, Willa. I have worked hard my whole life. What I am afraid of is letting you slip away because I was too much of a coward to reach for what I want." "And what do you want?" she whispered. "You," he said simply. "A life with you. A chance to build something together, to make this place thrive again, to take care of you the way you have taken care of everyone else." Tears pricked at Willa's eyes, but for the first time in years, they were not tears of despair. "I want that too. I am just afraid to hope for it." Owen squeezed her hand gently. "Then let me hope for both of us until you are ready." They stood there in the afternoon sunshine, hands clasped, and Willa felt the ice around her heart beginning to thaw. They talked for hours that afternoon, sitting on the porch steps while her father napped inside. Owen told her about growing up on a small farm in Kansas, about watching his mother slowly succumb to consumption, about the hard years after her death when he and his father barely scraped by. He spoke of coming to Colorado, seeking opportunity, of learning the horse trade, of his dreams for the future. Willa, in turn, told him about her childhood, about the mother she never knew but felt she understood through her father's stories. She spoke of the joy of running the ranch with her father before the accident, and the crushing weight of responsibility that had settled on her shoulders after. She talked about her fear that she would spend the rest of her life alone, caring for her father until he died and then facing an empty future. "That will not happen," Owen said firmly. "Not if I have anything to say about it." When the sun began to sink toward the mountains, Owen reluctantly stood to leave. "May I call on you again next Sunday?" "Yes," Willa said, not wanting him to go. "Or sooner if you would like." "I work every day until Saturday," Owen said. "But I could come by after work on Saturday evening if that would not be too late." "That would be perfect." Owen retrieved his horses and mounted. Before he rode away, he looked down at Willa with an expression that made her knees weak. "Thank you for today. It was the best afternoon I have had in longer than I can remember." "For me too," Willa admitted. After he left, she went inside to find her father awake and waiting. "Well," William asked. "He is wonderful, Papa. He seems like a good man, steady, not full of himself like those others. He said he wants to build a life with me." William's eyes grew misty. "Then he is the smartest man in this whole territory." Over the following weeks, Owen became a regular presence at the Calloway ranch. He came on Saturdays and Sundays, and sometimes he would stop by after work during the week, staying for supper before riding back to the Drummond ranch in the twilight. He brought supplies from town, repaired the sagging porch, fixed the fence, and started working on the barn. He never made Willa feel like she owed him anything. He simply worked because he wanted to, because he saw the need, and because helping her brought him joy. William watched the developing relationship with satisfaction. He saw the way his daughter's eyes lit up when Owen arrived, the way her laughter came more easily, the way she seemed to stand a little taller. And he saw the way Owen looked at Willa, with a combination of reverence and desire that reminded William of how he had felt about his own beloved wife. One evening in late August, after a supper of fried chicken and fresh vegetables from the garden, Owen asked if he might speak with William privately. Willa excused herself to clean up, though she kept glancing toward the parlor where the two men sat talking in low voices. "Mr. Calloway," Owen began, his hands clasped between his knees. "I love your daughter. I have loved her since the first time I really saw her, and every day I spend with her that love grows stronger. I want to marry her if you will give me your blessing and if she will have me." William regarded the younger man carefully. "You understand what you are asking for. I am not going anywhere. You would be responsible for me as well as Willa." "I know that, sir, and I welcome it. You are part of Willa, and I want all of her, including the people she loves." "Do you have the means to support a family?" Owen nodded. "I have been saving my wages for years. I have enough to buy some cattle and start rebuilding this place. Mr. Drummond has offered me a partnership interest in a new ranch he is starting south of here, which would provide steady income. We would not be rich, but we would be comfortable and we would have a future to build on." William felt a lump form in his throat. This was the moment he had prayed for and dreaded in equal measure. He wanted Willa to be happy, to have love and a family of her own. But selfishly he feared losing her, even though he knew Owen was promising to keep them together. "You have my blessing," William said gruffly. "You are a good man, Owen Blackwell, better than I had any right to hope for." Owen's face broke into a wide smile. "Thank you, sir. I promise I will spend the rest of my life making her happy. See that you do. Now go ask her before I change my mind." Owen found Willa in the kitchen, her hands in the dishwater. She turned when she heard his footstep, and the question in her eyes made his heart race. "Willa Calloway," he said, crossing the room to stand before her. "I know we have only been courting for a short time, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your fierce determination. I love the way you care for your father, and the way you make me feel like I am the luckiest man alive just by letting me be near you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, working beside you, building a future together. Will you marry me?" Willa's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight, and Willa felt like she was finally home after a long journey. When he kissed her, gentle and sweet, she tasted happiness for the first time in years. They were married 6 weeks later, in early October 1878, in the same little church where Willa had attended services all her life. The congregation turned out in force, and if some of the ladies whispered about the hasty wedding, they were silenced by the obvious love shining between the bride and groom. Willa wore a dress of pale blue silk that had belonged to her mother, altered to fit her slender frame. Owen wore a new suit purchased for the occasion, and when he saw Willa walking down the aisle on the arm of Reverend Thompson, with her father wheeling himself behind them, his eyes filled with tears. Theodore Montgomery was in attendance, looking uncomfortable and regretful. The other men who had courted and rejected Willa were there too, each of them clearly realizing what they had lost. Owen caught their stares and felt a surge of satisfaction. They were fools, every one of them, and he was fortunate beyond measure. After the ceremony, there was a simple reception at the church hall with cake and punch. Owen and Willa stood together, her hand in his, greeting well-wishers and accepting congratulations. Mrs. Henderson approached with a pinched smile. "Well, Mrs. Blackwell, I suppose congratulations are in order." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson," Willa said graciously. "It is quite fortunate that Mr. Blackwell was willing to take on your circumstances. Not every man would be so charitable." Owen stiffened, but Willa squeezed his hand. "My husband is not charitable, Mrs. Henderson. He is wise enough to recognize a good thing when he sees it, which is more than can be said for some." Mrs. Henderson's face flushed, and she hurried away. Owen looked down at his bride with admiration. "I like you when you are fierce." "Good, because you are going to see that side of me often," Willa said with a smile. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, in the small bedroom that was now theirs. William had insisted on moving to the smaller room off the kitchen, giving the newlyweds privacy. Owen carried Willa over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently inside. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Hello, husband," Willa replied, her heart full. Their lovemaking was tender and unhurried, a discovery of each other that left them both breathless and amazed. Afterward, lying in the darkness with Willa's head on his chest, Owen felt a profound sense of peace. "I never thought I could be this happy," Willa whispered. "Neither did I, but here we are." "Those other men really were fools," Owen chuckled. "The biggest fools in Colorado. And I am the most fortunate man alive." The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Owen moved his few possessions from the bunkhouse at the Drummond Ranch and settled into life at the Calloway place, which Willa still thought of as home but was now their home together. Owen took on the Mr. Drummond partnership, which meant he spent 3 days a week working the new ranch and the other days working their own property. The income was steady and good, and Owen immediately put it to use. By Christmas, they had purchased a small herd of cattle and 2 new horses. Owen repaired the barn and built a new chicken coop. He and Willa worked side by side, mending fences and clearing brush, preparing for spring planting. In the evenings, they would sit with William by the fire, talking and laughing, playing cards and reading aloud. William watched his daughter bloom under Owen's love and devotion. She smiled constantly now, her face alight with joy. And Owen, in turn, seemed to grow more confident and content each day. William had worried that he would be a burden in their new marriage, but Owen never made him feel that way. The younger man helped him without fuss, treating him with respect and genuine affection. One night in January, after Willa had gone to bed, Owen and William sat up talking. "I want to thank you," William said quietly. "For what, sir?" for loving my daughter the way she deserves, for seeing her value when others could not, for making her happy." Owen looked into the fire. "I should be thanking you, sir. You raised an extraordinary woman. Everything good in her comes from you. Her mother had a hand in it too, I like to think. I wish I could have known her." "She would have loved you," William said with certainty, "just as I have come to." Owen felt his throat tighten. His own father had died the previous winter, and he had mourned alone. Having William's acceptance and affection filled a hole he had not realized was still open. "That means more to me than you know." Spring came with a rush of wildflowers and new life. The cattle thrived, the garden flourished, and Willa discovered she was pregnant. When she told Owen, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing and crying at once. William wept openly when they shared the news with him, declaring that he would live to see his grandchild if it was the last thing he did. The summer passed in a blur of work and preparation. Owen built a cradle from oak wood, carving it with careful attention. Willa sewed tiny gowns and blankets, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. They turned the smallest bedroom into a nursery, painting it a cheerful yellow and filling it with everything a baby would need. In late September 1879, after a long labor that terrified Owen but which Willa endured with characteristic strength, their son was born. They named him William Owen Blackwell, after both their fathers, and he was perfect. Dark hair like his father, green eyes like his mother, and a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world, Willa Calloway held his grandson with trembling hands, tears streaming down his weathered face. "He is beautiful. You have given me such a gift." "He is your legacy, Papa," Willa said softly. "Your name will continue." The baby transformed their lives. Sleepless nights were worth it for the wonder of watching him grow. Owen proved to be a devoted father, rocking his son to sleep, changing diapers without complaint, and singing off-key lullabies that made Willa laugh. They were a family, complete and whole, and every day felt like a blessing. 2 years later, their second child arrived, a daughter they named Grace Margaret. She had auburn hair like her mother and her father's amber eyes, and she was as sweet-tempered as her brother was energetic. William adored both children, spending hours telling them stories and playing simple games within the limits of his mobility. The ranch continued to grow. By 1882, they had expanded their herd, purchased more land, and built a larger barn. Owen's partnership with Mr. Drummond proved highly profitable, and they were able to save enough money to think about the future with confidence. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. One evening in the summer of 1883, after the children were asleep and William had retired to his room, Owen and Willa sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. "You ever think about how different your life might have been?" Owen asked, his arm around her shoulders. "You mean if one of those other men had not rejected me?" Willa smiled. "All the time. And I thank God every day that they were too foolish to see what I had to offer, because if any of them had married me, I would not have you. And you are everything, Owen. You are my best friend, my partner, my love. You saw me when I was invisible to everyone else." Owen kissed her temple. "You were never invisible to me. From the moment I first really looked at you, I could not see anyone else. Do you remember what you said to me that day in town? When Theodore rode away, I said he was a fool. You said they were all fools and that you were fortunate." "I was right," Owen said firmly. "I am fortunate. Every single day I wake up next to you, I am the most fortunate man in the world." Willa turned to face him, cupping his cheek in her hand. "I love you so much, and I love you, always." Willa Calloway lived to see his grandchildren grow into bright, curious youngsters. Young William, or Billy as they called him, was 5 and Grace was 3 when their grandfather passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1884. They buried him on a hillside overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone marker that read, "Beloved Father and Grandfather." Willa mourned deeply, but she found comfort in knowing that her father had spent his final years surrounded by love and joy, that he had seen her happy and settled, and that his legacy would continue through his grandchildren. Life moved forward, as it always does. The ranch continued to prosper under Owen's careful management and Willa's steady hand. They added more children to their family, another son named Samuel in 1885 and twin girls, Emma and Elizabeth, in 1887. The house they had once thought adequate grew too small, and Owen built an addition with 4 new bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The children grew up hearing the story of how their parents met, how their father had recognized what other men could not see, how he had courted their mother with patience and dedication, how he had promised to build a life together and had kept that promise. They heard about their grandfather William, about his strength and love, about the sacrifices he and their mother had made for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary in October 1888, Owen took Willa back to the church where they had married. They stood in the empty sanctuary, hands clasped, remembering. "You ever regret it?" Owen asked. "Marrying a simple cowboy instead of a banker or a merchant," Willa laughed. "You are not a simple cowboy. You are a rancher, a father, a partner in a successful business, and the love of my life. And no, I have never regretted a single moment. Have you? My only regret is that I did not approach you sooner, that I wasted months watching you from a distance instead of gathering the courage to speak to you. But you did speak to me when it mattered. You saw me rejected and humiliated, and instead of turning away like everyone else, you saw an opportunity. I saw a woman who deserved so much better than what she was getting. I saw someone strong and beautiful and kind, someone who had been overlooked by fools too blind to recognize treasure when it was right in front of them." Willa leaned into her husband's embrace. "They really were fools, were they not? The biggest fools in the whole territory," Owen confirmed. "And I will be grateful to them for the rest of my life, because their foolishness gave me the chance to win your heart." They kissed in the quiet church, a reaffirmation of vows spoken a decade ago, a celebration of everything they had built together. Outside, the October sun shone warm on the mountains, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the sound of children laughing. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch became one of the most successful in the county. Owen's reputation as a fair and skilled rancher spread, and he was frequently consulted by other ranchers seeking advice. Willa became known for her generosity, often taking in women who found themselves in difficult circumstances, offering them work and dignity when others turned them away. She never forgot what it felt like to be rejected and dismissed, and she made it her mission to ensure that no one in her community experienced that same shame if she could prevent it. Their children thrived. Billy grew into a young man who loved the ranch life as much as his father did. Grace was gentle and artistic, spending hours painting the mountains and meadows that surrounded their home. Samuel had his mother's business sense and his father's work ethic, already talking about expanding the ranch when he was old enough. The twins, Emma and Elizabeth, were inseparable and mischievous, keeping their parents constantly entertained. In 1890, Owen's former employer, Mr. Drummond, decided to retire and move back east to live with his daughter. He offered Owen the opportunity to buy out his share of the partnership. It was a significant investment, but Owen and Willa had saved carefully, and they had built up enough credit in the community that securing the additional funds was not difficult. They became full owners of the southern ranch, which they merged with their original property to create one of the largest and most productive cattle operations in the region. Theodore Montgomery, who had opened a bank in Salida, approached Owen one day in town. He looked older than his years, with lines of dissatisfaction carved into his face. "Blackwell," he said stiffly, "I heard about your land purchase. Congratulations." "Thank you," Owen said coolly. Theodore shifted uncomfortably. "I also wanted to say that I was wrong about Willa. About everything. I was a fool." "Yes, you were," Owen agreed without heat, "but I appreciate you acknowledging it. She seems happy. Your family seems happy. We are very happy." Theodore nodded slowly. "I married Judith Parker 2 years ago. It is fine, I suppose. Comfortable." "Fine and comfortable are not the same as happy," Owen observed. "No," Theodore admitted, "they are not. You are a fortunate man, Blackwell." "I know," Owen said. "I am reminded of it every single day." As Theodore walked away, Owen felt a wave of sympathy for the man. He had chosen security over love, practicality over passion, and now he was living with the consequences of that choice. Owen, on the other hand, had chosen love, and it had given him everything. By 1895, the Blackwell Ranch was the largest in the county, employing over 30 men and running more than 2,000 head of cattle. Owen was offered a position on the town council, which he accepted reluctantly, preferring ranch work to politics, but recognizing the responsibility that came with success. Willa established a school on their property for the children of their workers, hiring a teacher and providing books and supplies. Education had always been important to her, and she wanted to ensure that every child in their community had opportunities she had once feared she would never have. Their eldest son, Billy, married at 22, bringing home a sweet young woman named Sarah who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property, and Billy took over much of the daily management of the cattle operation, freeing Owen to focus on the business side and to spend more time with his younger children. Grace met a young doctor who had recently arrived in Salida and fell deeply in love. Owen walked his daughter down the aisle with tears in his eyes, remembering the day he had married Willa and understanding, finally, what Willa Calloway must have felt watching his daughter marry. Joy and sorrow mingled together, pride and loss intertwined. Samuel decided to attend university in Denver, the first Blackwell to pursue higher education. Owen and Willa were immensely proud, even as they missed their son during his long absences. The twins showed no signs of settling down, both of them declaring that they were too busy having adventures to worry about marriage yet. On a quiet evening in the spring of 1898, Owen and Willa sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset. They were in their 40s now, no longer young but not yet old, their faces lined with laughter and hard work, their bodies strong from years of physical labor. Billy and Sarah's first child, a little girl named Willa after her grandmother, played in the yard under the watchful eye of Emma, who had finally decided that being an aunt was almost as good as being a mother. 20 years, Willa said softly. "Can you believe it has been 20 years since we married? Some days it feels like a lifetime, other days it feels like yesterday. Do you ever think about that day in town, when Theodore rode away?" Owen smiled. "I think about it often. It was the most important day of my life, because it was the day I finally had the courage to speak to you. I was so angry that day, so hurt and embarrassed. I felt like the whole world was laughing at me. And then I came along and told you they were all fools." "And you were right," Willa said, turning to look at her husband. "They were fools and you were fortunate." "We are both fortunate," Owen corrected, pulling her close. "I am fortunate that I recognized what they could not see." You are fortunate that you gave me a chance despite having every reason to be suspicious of yet another man making promises. It was not luck, though, Willa said thoughtfully. It was choice. You chose to see me. I chose to trust you. We both chose to work hard and build something together. Fortune had nothing to do with it. Owen considered this. You are right. Fortune might have put us in the same place at the same time, but everything that came after was because we chose each other and chose to honor that choice every single day. And I would choose you again, Willa said firmly. 1,000 times over I would choose you. As I would choose you, Owen replied, kissing her softly. Little Willa came running up to the porch, her dark curls bouncing. Grandpa, Grandma, come see the baby rabbits Emma found. They stood, hands clasped, and followed their granddaughter into the yard where their family was gathering. Billy and Sarah emerged from their house. Samuel was home from university for the summer. Grace and her doctor husband had ridden over for supper, and the twins were arguing good-naturedly about something inconsequential. This was their legacy, not just land and cattle and prosperity, but love that had multiplied and spread, touching everyone it reached. That night, after everyone had gone to their own homes or beds, Owen and Willa lay in the darkness of their bedroom, the same room where they had spent their wedding night 20 years ago. You remember what you said to me the first time you came to call? Willa asked. I said a lot of things. Which one? You said you did not see complications when you looked at me. You said you saw someone remarkable. I meant every word. I know you did. But Owen, you should know that I see the same thing when I look at you. I see a man who is kind and strong and true. A man who kept every promise he ever made to me. A man who gave me a life more beautiful than I ever dreamed possible. Owen pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. We have built a good life, have we not? The best life, Willa confirmed. Not an easy life, but a good one. Worth every moment of hard work. Worth everything. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, just as they had every night for 2 decades, just as they would for decades more to come. The town of Salida continued to grow and change. New families arrived, old families moved away, businesses opened and closed, but through it all the Blackwell Ranch remained a constant, a symbol of what hard work and true love could accomplish. People spoke of Owen and Willa with respect and admiration, telling the story of how a simple cowboy had won the heart of a woman that no one else wanted, how he had seen value where others saw only burden, how he had built an empire from nothing but determination and love. The children who had once rejected Willa at church socials, who had whispered and pointed at her, grew up and told their own children about the Blackwells, about the importance of looking beyond surface circumstances to see the true worth of a person. Mrs. Henderson, who had delighted in Willa's misfortunes, eventually apologized in her old age, admitting that she had been small-minded and cruel, and Willa forgave her with grace. Theodore Montgomery never found the happiness he had sacrificed for security. He and Judith had a civil but loveless marriage that produced 2 children who eventually left Colorado and never returned. On his deathbed in 1905, Theodore asked to see Owen and Willa. They came, because despite everything, they had learned that holding grudges served no purpose. I wanted to tell you both, Theodore said weakly, that watching your life together has been the greatest lesson I ever learned. I chose wrong, and I have regretted it every day since. But seeing you happy, seeing your family thrive, that has given me some comfort. At least my foolishness resulted in your happiness. Rest easy, Willa said gently, taking his frail hand. You taught me an important lesson, too. You taught me that the right person will see your worth, and that is the only person who matters. After Theodore died, Owen and Willa stood in the churchyard where he was buried, reflecting on the strange paths life takes. "You feel vindicated?" Owen asked. "No," Willa said honestly. "I feel sad for him. He spent his life chasing something he thought would make him happy, and he missed what was right in front of him." "You have become very wise in your old age, Mrs. Blackwell," Willa laughed. "I am not old, I am mature." "You are beautiful," Owen said, and he meant it. At 49, with silver threading through her auburn hair and lines around her eyes, Willa was more beautiful to him than she had been at 22. She was beautiful because of everything they had shared, every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had celebrated together. The new century brought changes to the West. Automobiles began to appear on the streets of Salida, though horses were still the primary means of transportation. Electricity came to town and eventually to the ranch, bringing light to the darkness and making Willa's work easier. The telephone arrived, connecting them to distant places and people. The world was becoming smaller, more connected, but the essential things remained the same. In 1910, Owen and Willa celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. Billy had given them 5 grandchildren, Grace had 4, Samuel had 3 with his wife Rebecca, and the twins had finally married, Emma to a rancher from the next county and Elizabeth to a lawyer in Denver. The house was full of laughter and love, children running everywhere, multiple conversations happening at once, and through it all, Owen and Willa sat together, watching the chaos with contentment. "We did well," Owen said. "We did very well," Willa agreed. Billy stood up and clinked his glass, calling for attention. "I want to make a toast," he announced, "to my parents who taught us all what love really means, who showed us that true partnership means working together, supporting each other, and never giving up, who built this ranch and this family from nothing but determination and devotion. To Owen and Willa Blackwell, the finest people I know." The room erupted in cheers and raised glasses. Owen felt tears sting his eyes, and he saw that Willa was crying too. "How did we get so lucky?" she whispered. "It was not luck," Owen reminded her. "It was choice. We chose each other. Best choice I ever made." "Same," Owen said, kissing her to the applause and laughter of their family. As the years continued to pass, Owen and Willa gradually stepped back from the daily operations of the ranch. Billy took over completely, running it with the same care and attention his father had shown. The other children had their own successful lives and families. The ranch continued to prosper under Billy's management, and the Blackwell name became synonymous with integrity and quality throughout Colorado. Owen and Willa spent their days in quieter pursuits now. They took long walks around the property, remembering. They sat on the porch in the evenings, talking and holding hands. They visited with their grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling stories of the old days, of the Wild West that was slowly disappearing into memory and legend. One afternoon in the autumn of 1918, when Owen was 65 and Willa was 62, they rode out to the hillside where Willa Calloway was buried. They had maintained his grave carefully over the years, keeping it clear of weeds and leaving fresh flowers regularly. They stood together, arms around each other, looking down at the stone. "He would be so proud of you," Owen said. "Of us," Willa corrected. "He loved you like a son, Owen. You gave him peace in his final years. You gave him the assurance that I would be cared for and loved. I hope I fulfilled that promise." Willa turned to face him, cupping his weathered face in her hands. "You have fulfilled every promise you ever made to me and more. You have given me 40 years of happiness, of partnership, of love that has never wavered. You have given me children and grandchildren and a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. You have been my best friend, my lover, my partner in every sense of the word. If you had done nothing else in your entire life, that would have been enough." Owen kissed her, long and slow, the way he had been kissing her for 40 years. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "You remember what I said to you that first day when I asked to court you?" Owen asked. "You said a lot of things." "I said that when I saw you, I saw someone remarkable." "I remember. I want you to know that 40 years later I still see the same thing. You are still remarkable, Willa. More remarkable now than ever, because I know everything you have overcome, everything you have built, everything you have given to this family and to me." Willa leaned her head on his shoulder. "We were both remarkable. Together we were extraordinary." Owen corrected. "We are extraordinary. We are not done yet." They lived another decade together, watching the world change around them. The Great War came and went, touching them only peripherally through distant relatives and friends. The Roaring Twenties brought jazz and prosperity and changing social norms. Women got the vote in 1920, and Willa cast her ballot with pride, remembering the girl she had been who thought she would never have any say in her own future. Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in the summer of 1928, at the age of 75. He simply did not wake up one morning, still holding Willa's hand, a small smile on his face. Willa grieved deeply, but found comfort in knowing that he had lived a full, happy life, that he had died peacefully, and that he had been surrounded by love until the very end. At his funeral, the church was packed with family, friends, ranch hands past and present, and community members whose lives had been touched by Owen Blackwell's quiet kindness and steady integrity. Billy eulogized his father with tears streaming down his face, talking about the man who had taught him everything important: how to work hard, how to treat people fairly, how to love deeply and without reservation. "My father used to tell me," Billy said, "that he was the most fortunate man in the world because he had recognized what others could not see. He said that other men were fools for rejecting my mother, and that their foolishness had given him the greatest blessing of his life. But the truth is, we were all fortunate. Fortunate to have him as a father, a grandfather, a friend, a mentor. Fortunate to witness the kind of love he and my mother shared, a love that never wavered, never diminished, never faltered. That kind of love is rare, and we are all better for having seen it." Willa sat in the front pew, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, and felt Owen's presence as surely as if he were sitting beside her. He was not gone, not really. He lived on in their children's faces, in their grandchildren's laughter, in the ranch they had built together, in the values they had instilled, in the love they had shared. She lived another 5 years, remaining active and engaged until the very end. She saw Billy's youngest son marry. She held her first great-great-grandchild. She watched the ranch continue to thrive under the 4th generation of family management. And every day, she felt Owen with her, encouraging her, loving her, reminding her that they had built something that would last long after they were both gone. Willa Blackwell passed away in her sleep on a warm October night in 1933, exactly 55 years after she had married Owen. She was 77 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, her last word a whispered "Owen" that her daughter Grace heard and repeated to the family. They buried her next to Owen on the hillside overlooking the ranch, with a headstone that read simply, "Willa Calloway Blackwell, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, 1856–1933. She was remarkable." The funeral was even larger than Owen's had been. 5 generations of Blackwells attended, along with hundreds of community members whose lives had been touched by Willa's generosity and grace. They told stories of her kindness, her strength, her wisdom, her love, Grace stood and spoke about her mother with quiet dignity. My mother taught us that rejection does not define us, that other people's blindness to our worth does not diminish our value. She taught us that the right person will see us truly, and that person is worth waiting for. She showed us what real love looks like, not the romantic fantasy, but the daily choice to honor and cherish another person through good times and hard times, through joy and sorrow, through youth and old age. She and my father gave us an impossible standard to live up to, but in trying, we have all become better people. After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch house, now a sprawling complex of buildings housing multiple generations. They sat together, eating and talking and remembering, celebrating a life well lived and a love that had transformed everyone it touched. Billy stood on the porch where his parents had stood so many times, looking out over the land they had built together. His own grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter floating on the autumn air. His son stood beside him, and his grandson, 3 generations of Blackwell men looking at the empire that had been built from nothing but hard work and true love. "Tell me the story again," Billy's grandson said. He was 8 years old enough to understand but young enough to still believe in magic. "Which story?" Billy asked, though he knew. "The story of how great-grandpa and great-grandma met." Billy smiled and began the tale he had heard 100 times, the tale he had told 100 times more. "Your great-grandmother was rejected by 6 men who were too foolish to see how special she was. She stood in the street, humiliated and heartbroken, certain that she would never find love. But your great-grandfather was watching, and he saw what those other men could not see." "What did he see?" "He saw a woman who was strong and kind and beautiful. He saw someone worth fighting for, worth working for, worth building a life with. So he went to her and told her that all those other men were fools, and that he was fortunate to have the chance they had thrown away. And then they got married. Eventually, yes. First, he courted her properly. He came to her house and met her father and helped fix up their ranch. He showed her through his actions, not just his words, that he was serious, that he saw her value, that he would never reject her the way those other men had. And they lived happily ever after." Billy looked out at the land his parents had built, at the family they had created, at the legacy they had left behind. "Yes," he said softly, "they lived happily ever after. Not because life was easy, but because they faced it together. Not because they never had problems, but because they solved them as partners. They chose each other, and they kept choosing each other every single day for 55 years. The boy thought about this. Great-grandpa was smart. "The smartest man I ever knew," Billy agreed. "Because he understood that other people's rejection of something valuable says more about them than it does about the thing they are rejecting. Those 6 men who turned your great-grandmother away, they were the fools. And your great-grandfather was fortunate." "We are all fortunate," the boy said seriously. Billy ruffled his grandson's hair. "Yes, we are, because of the life they built, because of the love they shared, because of the example they set. We are all fortunate to be their descendants." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson and purple, the Blackwell family gathered together, multiple generations united by bonds of blood and love. They had all been shaped by Owen and Willa's story, by the choices those 2 people had made 75 years ago when a cowboy saw past what everyone else saw and recognized true worth. The ranch would continue for generations more. The family would grow and spread across the country. But they would always come back to this place, to this land, to this story of a woman who was rejected by fools and a man who was wise enough to see that their loss was his extraordinary gain. They would tell the story to their children and their children's children, A reminder that true love sees past circumstances to the heart of a person, that the right person will recognize your worth when others cannot, and that choosing each other is just the beginning of a lifelong adventure. On the hillside overlooking the ranch, 3 graves stood side by side. William Calloway, who had raised a remarkable daughter, Willa Calloway Blackwell, who had found her perfect partner, and Owen Blackwell, who had been wise enough to recognize fortune when he saw it. Their legacy lived on in the land, in the family, and most of all, in the enduring power of a love that had transformed rejection into blessing, hardship into triumph, and foolishness into fortune. The evening breeze whispered through the grass, carrying with it the echoes of laughter and love, of a life fully lived and a love story that had touched generations. And if you listened carefully, you might hear the soft words that Owen Blackwell had spoken that long ago day in Salida, words that had changed everything. They are fools. I am fortunate. And so he was. So they all were. Fortunate beyond measure, blessed beyond words, and loved beyond time.